Heading north now towards Pretoria on the R21, and we're off to a flying start as we enter the Flying Saucer interchange, connecting the R21 with the N1. From above, the interchange truly lives up to its name, resembling a UFO. It was actually named after one of Pretoria's quirkiest spots from the 1960s, a roadhouse built in the shape of a flying saucer. Sadly, it's no longer around. And by the way, the N1 runs all the way from South Africa's northern border to Cape Town. Shortly coming up on our left is the middle-class suburb of Van Reineveld, named after a pioneering pilot who in the early 1920s made a difficult journey across Africa in a Vickers Vimy aircraft. This flight was significant because it showed that airplanes could fly long distances. This was a big deal at the time when air travel was still very new and challenging. Both men were knighted for this achievement. Van Reineveld also helped to establish the South African Air Force. And in fact, the busiest Air Force base in South Africa is also close by, named Waterkloof. It is home to the presidential jet, a Boeing 737, and called Nkwazi. After the gantry or electronic toll gate on your right, you will notice a white building with a tower among the trees. This is the Rasmus Boutique Hotel. And now on our left, the off-ramp to Solomon Mshlangu Drive. It was named for a South African anti-apartheid fighter who was executed at the young age of 23, despite the fact that he did not actually kill anyone. The road also provides access to the Waterkloof Air Force Base, which I mentioned earlier. In 2013, the base gained international attention when a private jet made an unauthorized landing here for a Gupta family wedding. The landing was perceived as a blatant example of the undue influence the Gupta family had over the South African government. Let's get back to the Erasmus Boutique Hotel, converted from an old farmhouse belonging to the Erasmus family. They were early pioneers in the 1850s and cattle farmers. As Pretoria expanded, the land gave way to suburbs. Recently, the Erasmus Family Trust partnered with a developer to transform the last part of the farm as part of an overall 6 billion investments, including retail spaces, medical consulting rooms, offices and a gym. The family is also linked to Pretoria's famous haunted house, which strikingly resembles the eerie mansion from the Scooby-Doo cartoons. We are now driving through the suburb of Monument Park. It is one of the older and more desirable upmarket areas, known for its spacious tree-lined properties, and its name comes from its view of one of Pretoria's famous landmarks. According to a study conducted a few years earlier, including 73 capital cities, it was found that Pretoria was the most affordable city to live in worldwide in terms of housing prices relative to average monthly income. On our left is the Groenkloof Nature Reserve, proclaimed in 1895 by President Paul Kruger as Africa's first game reserve to protect wildlife from hunters. You might spot a wildebeest or giraffe or ostrich. Just keep your eyes open, and this reserve is very popular for outdoor activities such as hiking and mountain biking. The Broncos brothers, notable pioneers, also settled in this area as early as 1839. Their Trek party fought in a significant battle against the Matabele and also explored Natal before settling here. Each brother was granted a farm, and one of these became part of the land where Pretoria was established. Coming up shortly on our right is the Waterkloof Golf Course, a premier golf destination in Pretoria. South Africa has a strong golf culture, boasting over 500 courses nationwide. However, the real champions of local fandom are rugby and soccer. Take note of the hill on the right. It's called Klapperkop, or directly translated coconut head, but actually it comes from the name of a plant growing on the hill. You will also be able to notice another hill in the distance in front of you. These are significant hills in the history of Pretoria. They house two of the forts that were built to protect the city in the late 1800s. The reason being is that our then President Paul Kruger realized that after a failed invasion by the British had already taken place, the city was vulnerable and had to be protected. But we'll catch up on this story also a little bit later. Not far from Klaperkop, the Radcliffe Observatory once stood, leaving its mark with local street names named after stars and constellations. There's a funny story where the municipality once misspelled Canopus as Canopsis, and when pointed out, they suggested renaming the star instead of reprinting all the maps. Ahead of us is the cityscape of Pretoria, nestled between several hills and backed by the Magalies Mountains. In the front, there's a colossal building that some described as a ship, a bridge, or even a sewing machine. Use your imagination. I will chat about it a bit later. As we approach the circle ahead, you'll notice numerous flagpoles and structures. These were erected to commemorate South Africa being the first African country to host the FIFA World Cup in 2010. The tower to your right showcased the 24-meter, 8-story high fiberglass soccer ball for this event. From the earliest times, the San and then later the Iron Age people thrived in this area thanks to abundant river and spring water, lush vegetation and plentiful game. However, their peaceful existence was shattered in the late 1820s by Mzilikazi, a fierce warrior who had rebelled against King Shaka Zulu. Shaka led the most powerful and feared army in South Africa at the time, and Mzilikazi sought to build his own empire. He attacked clans as he moved into the interior, incorporating the young and strong into his ranks, capturing women, burning homesteads, and causing many to flee for their lives. Mzilikazi settled north of present-day Pretoria for a while, but with Zulu impis in hot pursuit, he was forced to move west, away from here. And we'll continue his story a little bit later. On our left is the Fountain Valley Resort, used by the locals for recreation and to enjoy a braai or barbecue. It once hosted a fabulous collection of life-size bronze statues of South African struggle heroes, ranging from the 1600s to Mandela leading the procession. It has since unfortunately taken a long march to Cape Town. We are now passing under several bridges carrying the main highways and railway lines entering and exiting the city. The last bridge is for South Africa's first high-speed train, the Gautrain, which reaches speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour or 99 miles per hour. Gautrain means train of gold, and you will see the bridge coming up ahead of us. It connects Pretoria with Johannesburg, also known locally as Egoli or the City of Gold, and Oliver Tambo Airport. As you will notice, gold has always played a key role in Gauteng, the place of gold and its story. We are now heading towards Tsaba Tshwane, meaning Mountain of Tshwane, a major military area in Pretoria, initially established by the British in the early 1900s, and you might see some army vehicles as we drive. Let me share some more about the early pioneers who shaped the city as we know it today. On your right, look out for the impressive Voortrekker monument that should be coming into view shortly. Built to honor these pioneers, known as the Voortrekkers or front pullers. These Dutch farmers, dissatisfied with British rule in the early 1800s, journeyed from the Cape Colony's eastern frontier into South Africa's interior. They sought land to establish their own state, free from British influence. This mass movement, known as the Groot Trek or Great Trek, is captured in the world's largest intact historic marble frieze inside the monument. The Voortrekkers faced severe hardships and also conflicts with indigenous peoples. In a legendary encounter, a small group of them, led by Andries Pretorius, defeated a large number of Zulu warriors in the Battle of Blood River on December 16, 1838. This epic battle is a cornerstone of Afrikaner history. Interestingly, the monument is designed so that on the anniversary of this battle, Sunlight shines through an opening in the dome, illuminating a symbolic grave inscribed with "We for Thee, South Africa." Additionally, the aircraft warning light on top of the monument continuously flashes these words in Morse code. As mentioned before, this area we are approaching is rich in military history and is home to our armed forces. The brown building on your left at 11 o'clock, if you look through the trees, is Pretoria's first military hospital. When our late President Mandela passed away in December 2013, his body was transported daily from this hospital to the Union buildings, where it lay in state for 3 days. The twin buildings that should be coming up ahead of us shortly were once occupied by the Iron and Steel Corporation, or ISCOR, established in Pretoria in 1928. It significantly boosted the city's industrial growth by creating jobs and stimulating related industries. Today, Pretoria hosts numerous manufacturing companies, including prominent automotive manufacturers. It included BMW's first international plant. We are now heading towards the city center. As mentioned earlier, Mzilikazi's arrival caused the tribes in the Pretoria area to flee, creating the illusion of empty land for the arriving pioneers. The Voortrekkers played a crucial role in driving out the feared warrior Mzilikazi and his Matabele. Local tribes supported the Voortrekkers as they too suffered under Mzilikazi's rule. Ultimately, Mzilikazi was forced to flee to present-day Zimbabwe, where he established his new capital, Bulawayo. Can you remember the colossal building I pointed out as we entered Pretoria? Soon it will appear again on the right-hand side in the distance. This is the University of South Africa, one of the world's largest correspondence universities, with over 300,000 students worldwide. Its most notable student, Nelson Mandela. The distant poles you see on the hill ahead are that part of Freedom Park. This park includes key features like the Isivivane, a spiritual resting place for those who contributed to South Africa's fight for freedom. Another important element is the Wall of Names, nearly 700 meters long, and it lists the names of people who played significant roles in various conflicts, from early tribal wars to the anti-apartheid movements. It also includes both world wars. The poles themselves are sculptural reeds representing the rebirth and renewal of the South African nation. While we've just been discussing freedom, we are now approaching a site historically associated with bondage and punishment, located, ironically, opposite Freedom Park. Pretoria Central Prison was the official site for capital punishment in South Africa during the apartheid era. In other words, where executions were carried out at the gallows. Inside the museum here, you can find a replica of the cell of our most famous prisoner from Robben Island. Can you guess who? Nelson Mandela, that's right. Ironically, this prisoner later became our president. The prison is now on your left. The facility's name was changed to Kgosi Mampuru II Correctional Services in honor of a 19th century local chief who resisted Boer rule and was subsequently hanged. In 2006, Ananias Mate, a man with a military background, slicked himself up with Vaseline and wriggled through an impossibly small 20 by 60 centimeter windows, staging a Hollywood-style escape from the C-Max prison here. He enjoyed 2 weeks of freedom before a massive manhunt brought him back. On our left, we've just passed the Army headquarters, and the South African Air Force headquarters is also in close proximity. We are now heading towards what was once the longest urban street in South Africa, and possibly in the world. Church Street, which has been renamed to 4 different street names, stretches for about 26 kilometers and is the main street of Pretoria. Street names were changed after 1994 to honor figures who contributed to South Africa's journey towards democracy. The street is also linked to a very influential historical figure, Paul Kruger, also affectionately known as Oom Paul or Uncle Paul. A key Boer leader from the late 1800s, Kruger significantly impacted South Africa's history. He joined the Great Trek and fought in a major battle against Mzilikazi forces as a young boy at 11, and later became the president of the Old Transvaal, or ZAR. Kruger was deeply suspicious of British intentions, especially after gold was discovered in Johannesburg. He fought hard to maintain independence, but the South African War ultimately ended in defeat. During the war, he escaped on his personal train to Lorenzo Marx and then by ship to Europe, refusing to be subdued to the British. He lived in exile until his death in Switzerland. His body was then returned to South Africa for a state funeral, and he is buried in Heroes Acre within the Church Street Cemetery. In another section of the cemetery, Prince Christian Victor lies buried. He was a member of the British royal family and grandchild of Queen Victoria. He served as a staff officer during the South African War, but died untimely at the age of 33. His sister recounted in her memoirs an intriguing visitation by his ghost 18 months after his death. He appeared seated, dressed in army khaki, with his favorite dachshund on his knee, reassuring her of his well-being. Soon on our left, as we turn into WF and Nkomo Street, one of the new street names for Church Street, we'll pass Kruger Museum, originally Paul Kruger's presidential residence, coming up on our left now. This historic house was among the first in Pretoria to have electricity and a telephone. Take note of the two lions on the veranda or on the stoep, and I'll share some interesting information about it later. Coming up on our left is the brick building known as Gamotle House. Check out the roundels featuring the images of native faces. This was the first building in Pretoria to prominently display indigenous people, hence it's aptly named the beautiful place. Make sure to take a good look at those roundels. Married black women were eligible for extra privileges during apartheid. An intriguing local custom involved black men hanging their hats on the wall hooks. A woman would then enter and choose a hat and then marry its owner. As we approach Pretoria Central District, you'll see many government buildings. While there are grand old structures like the Union Buildings, most structures prioritize function over aesthetics, making Pretoria perhaps less visually striking. We are now heading towards the historic heart of Pretoria. As we draw closer, you should be able to see a statue of Paul Kruger in the distance, dominating Church Square. When the Voortrekkers settled here, the area became a hub for trade, recreation and religious gatherings. Strong in their faith, the site hosted the city's first church, hence the name Church Square. The farmers in the area would come with their ox wagons and camped to attend communion. Over time, Church Square transformed from a religious center to a commercial hub and government offices. We are now turning north into Bosman Street. When the church on the square was sold, two new ones were built, including the one coming up shortly on our left. The Dutch Reformed Church was a loyal supporter of the policies of apartheid, providing theological justification for the system. Turning into Madiba Street now, in reference to Nelson Mandela's Xhosa clan name. Remember 2014, when the world was glued to Oscar Pistorius' trial for his girlfriend's murder? The High Court, where it all unfolded, is just ahead of us on the left. Across from the court, 50 years earlier, Mandela faced trial in the Palace of Justice, the building coming up to your right with its stone pillars. Mandela was convicted in the Rivonia trial, sentenced to life for sabotage acts to overthrow the apartheid government. Just past the white building on the left, look for a two-story building with the name Eureka written on the facade. It's one of the few remaining examples of flat above store in Pretoria. Owners included Naumel Pierce and Sammy Marks, who kick-started Pretoria's industries, from distilling gin and whiskey to a canning factory. The last owner operated a cigarette factory processing Transvaal tobacco. On your right, the building with square and arch windows, along with the two adjacent buildings that will come into view as we turn the corner, showcases early 20th century Pretoria. Two served as libraries and the smaller one was a bookbinding store. Just 2 blocks away lies the Kynoch building, believed to be Pretoria's oldest shop, dating from 1889, once a gunsmith and tent shop. And by the way, in South Africa we also use the term Madibas to refer to money, as Nelson Mandela's face is on all South African banknotes. We are now turning south on Thabo Sehumi Street, named after a local political activist against apartheid. Shortly after the traffic lights, yet another quaint building from Pretoria's early history. The building on the corner with the tower originally was an upmarket shoe shop called Cuthbert's. When we've crossed the Church Street pedestrian boulevard, follow the Queen's building on your right and you will spot the green arcade entrance. Originally, Pretoria's long city blocks had small alleys, later evolving into covered arcades for pedestrian comfort and safety. While these arcades added charm and function, they also made the streets less lively, possibly contributing to Pretoria's reputation as a more tranquil city compared to bustling Johannesburg next door. We have now turned into Pretoria Street, named after a father and son. Just down the street in the opposite direction, you'll discover the State Theatre, Africa's largest theatre complex. Notably, in 1988, the area witnessed a tragic event when a white supremacist known as the White Wolf unleashed a mass shooting in the square. Another dramatic event occurred when the bust of former apartheid leader mysteriously collapsed into the theatre's complex parking garage, exactly 40 years to the day after South Africa became a republic. Coming up ahead of us on the right is the back of the Raadsaal, marking the southern entrance to Church Square. It served as the parliament of the Boer Republic and housed President Kruger's office. We are now turning south into Paul Kruger Street. In 1865, Pretoria had a bit of a pickle. They sentenced an English builder, Alexander Anderson, to 12 months hard labor, but forgot they didn't have a jail. The town struck a deal. Build us a jail and you're free to go. Motivated by the promise of freedom, Anderson got to work straight away and whipped up Pretoria's first jail right behind the Raadsaal. Talk about DIY justice. You might have also noticed the bus stations and bus lanes. This is Pretoria's bus rapid transit system, named Arieng, which means let's go. It's designed to make getting around the city easier by connecting key areas with efficient and affordable public transport. Pretoria introduced the first public transport in 1897 with horse-drawn trams. When we became a Union of South Africa in 1910, it was replaced by electric trams, and later it evolved into trolley buses and eventually into the buses we know today. Ahead of us, at the end of Paul Kruger Street, is the Pretoria Railway Station. Designed by Sir Herbert Baker, a British-born architect who also designed the Union buildings. The first train arrived in Pretoria in 1893, connecting the capital with Cape Town, and this station is also associated with 2 luxury trains, the Blue Train and Rovers Rail. As we are approaching the next intersection, look to the left behind the bus station and spot the small astronaut in front of the blue and white building. This is the Science and Technology Museum that turns learning into adventure with interactive exhibits on technology and space exploration. This area has quite a few museums, and one of them features cultural exhibits on various ethnic groups, including interesting stone and Iron Age artifacts, as well as an Egyptian mummy. Another museum will be coming up shortly as well. It's at Itsong National Museum of Natural History, or Transvaal Museum, with very interesting skeletons in front. Coming into view shortly on the right is the City Hall with three very significant statues. The man standing in front is Martinus Wessels Pretorius, the founder of Pretoria. The man on the horse behind him, his father, Andries Pretorius, the hero of Blood River, after whom the city was named, and right at the back, Chief Tshwane, after whom the municipality was named. Immediately on our left now, the Natural Museum with the skeleton of a fin whale in front. The museum has exhibitions on the Earth's early history, hominin fossils, including Mrs. Bless, actually now believed to be a Mr., and extensive collections of South African animals and birds. Ahead of us, you should now be able to clearly see the railway station. Just opposite the station, to the right, is the pitched red roof of the Victoria Hotel. Dating back to 1894, it's Pretoria's oldest hotel, known as the Grand Old Lady. It also used to be the headquarters for the luxurious Rovers Rail. We will be turning east onto Jeff Masemola Street, named after the man known as the Tiger of Azania, or Bra Jeff. He served the longest sentence on Robben Island of any political prisoner. Also coming up on our left now is the building with a small tower is Barton Keep. Its style and design resemble a French chateau or medieval castle. All the material were imported from England and the Netherlands. The owner, Edmund Burke, came from an Irish family, but was a very good friend of President Kruger, like Sammy Marks and others. When the British invaded Pretoria during the South African War, they occupied his house. The Burke family left South Africa, but sent medical supplies to the Boer Hospital in Pretoria, run by his brother. After the war, Edmund returned to South Africa and became the mayor of Pretoria. Burgers Park, coming up on our left, was the site of Pretoria's first botanical garden. We are now approaching a very significant site. This is the house where the Treaty of Vereniging, which ended the South African War, resulting in the Boers losing their independence, was signed on May 31st, 1902. On our right is Melrose House, built in 1886 by successful Pretoria businessman George Hayes. It's no surprise that this beautiful Victorian mansion caught the eyes of the British forces after they invaded Pretoria in June 1900 and used it for over 18 months. Today it's a museum showcasing period furniture and the very table where the treaty was signed. Legend has it that Mrs. Hayes never approved of the soldiers occupying her beautiful home. Today you might still see her shadow moving through the rooms, closing curtains and working on her needlework to reclaim her once tranquil abode. Other eerie encounters include unseen hands pinching, touching, doors slamming, the smell of cigar smoke in the billiard room, and footsteps. The ghosts in the attic are said to be the most hostile. And there's a famous South African folk song called Sari Mare, though its authorship remains a mystery. One theory links it to Jacob Maria, the original namesake of the street. Legend has it that a Cape journalist turned soldier fell for Maria's daughter and penned the song to an American folk tune. The catchy melody spread beyond the Boer commanders through soldiers returning from the South African Boer War. Later, Sari Mare even found its way to Russia, where it was sung during the World Wars. Coming up ahead is another landmark named after Queen Victoria. The stone bridge spans the Apis River, and I will tell you an interesting story about Winston Churchill as soon as we're en route to the Union Buildings. The suburb across the street is Sunnyside, one of the oldest in Pretoria, and it used to be a vibrant, safe neighborhood, but today, sadly, its character has changed and no longer resembles its former charm.